Senator Roberts, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here today. Who monitors the progress of controlled burning in relation to bushfires?
One hand to you.
Thank you, Senator. Joe Buffoni, Deputy Coordinator General of the National Emergency Management Agency. The states and territories specifically monitor the fuel reduction programs in each state, and it's different across each state. So in some areas it's rural fire services or country fire services. In other areas it's a land management agency, but it very clearly sits with the states and territories in terms of managing and monitoring and delivering on their targets.
Right, so what have the various states and territories set in terms of goals for controlled burning?
So last year they had challenges actually meeting their targets. That's because the window to actually undertake burning programs was reduced quite significantly. First of all because of the wet periods, but then also because of some of the extreme heat. So the window is significantly less. What they did do though is, as things eased in relation to La Nina, is that they started to bring on additional personnel to start to have a focus area on the higher risk areas. They also looked at other options in relation to mechanical clearing and those sorts of activities, but also work with communities for communities to undertake their own sort of fuel reduction and fuel management across the country. But without a doubt, the period to actually achieve that burning has reduced.
Okay, thank you. So you're aware that they haven't achieved much. In fact, reporting in December from Jonathan Lee, LEA, at Sky News indicated New South Wales had only achieved 20% of its hazard reduction burns halfway through the year. Have you had any up-to-date figures on that?
I don't have up-to-date figures with me, Senator, but as I said, we met with the commissioners and chief officers from around the country, and they advised, it was basically a collaborative discussion around this particular issue, and they advised that they were putting significant effort into trying to increase to increase the work done to reduce the risk. And the other key thing, though, is that they're having more of a focus on higher risk areas and different techniques, in particular around townships, and that's pretty much across the country, Senator.
Yes, it seems to be. Sky News Australia says it can exclusively reveal the Rural Fire Service has hazard reduced around 60,000 hectares, roughly 20% of its 300,000 hectare target, at almost the halfway point of the year. And Sky News then went on in the same article to discuss how far behind various states were. So can you please take on notice to provide anything further that you have in terms of detail around controlled burn goals being set and how much is being fulfilled across the country?
We can take that on notice, Senator. As I said, we don't specifically monitor it, so we will ask the states and territories to provide that information.
So if we aren't doing controlled burns, then governments are basically setting the country up to burn in worse bushfires. Why aren't controlled burns a huge priority for you as a National Emergency Management Agency?
It's not that they're not a huge priority for us, Senator. It's actually we don't have any jurisdiction at all over controlled burning, nor do we have the legislation or even the human resources. It is a state and territory responsibility with all of the legislation and management arrangements that sits within those jurisdictions.
That answers my questions there. Minister, I just thought I'd make a comment. I went up to Bloomfield area early this year, mid-January, and just some comments. Some of the residents were saying that they had very high praise for the quality of the individual workers in various agencies, state and federal. There was a lack of leadership and coordination overall through the project. I know that's not the liaison officer's function, so I'm not having a go at you. There was a 3 to 4 week delay in Bloomfield in people just getting in there and doing anything at all, even to start. And I agree with you, the locals did a marvellous job in just reopening roads and just sharing each other's workloads. Amazing, Senator Green.
Yeah, I'm certainly, thanks Senator Roberts, I'm certainly aware, and look, after every disaster unfortunately, we see, people go through a lot in those experiences, and sometimes people don't get exactly the level of support that they would like to see, whether it be from local, state or federal governments. What I can say is that I know that in relatively early stages there were SES personnel, so Queensland Government SES personnel in the communities in and around Bloomfield. I'd have to check whether specifically they were in Bloomfield and what date. We also had, we deployed people from Disaster Relief Australia to work in some of those communities as well. That's a veteran-led volunteer organisation that we are funding to expand its reach. There did end up being ADF personnel in some of those communities as well. Again, I'd have to work out exactly who was in Bloomfield as opposed to Ayton and some of the other communities, Dagara. I know that SES personnel were in Dagara, for example.
First week of January.
In the first week of January, so relatively soon. But equally, I recognise that community members did an enormous amount themselves, and we do see that after disasters as well. But governments do work together as much as we can to try to get other resources in as quickly as we can. In those areas, there was an additional complication around access to simply get people in. So one of the things that we ended up getting the ADF to do was actually provide effectively barge services to get personnel and equipment in to help with the recovery. But we couldn't get people in until access was available. So sometimes these things do take a little longer than what people would like to see, but I can assure you that there was a lot of effort that went in across all levels of government to get people support.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts.